Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes and members across 150 countries. I've been doing a course called Learn Outdoor Photography Tips on a Shoot, Essential Skills when I'm recording footage at historical sites for use in my videos. Skillshare allows you to explore your creativity and learn new skills, from photography and illustration to graphic design and more, and you can find classes that will match your goals and interests. Interested in making a career pivot or up-leveling your skills, then Skillshare is the resource for you. Skillshare is ad-free. New premium classes are launched each week, and the entire catalog is now available with subtitles in Spanish, French, German, and Portuguese. There is something for everyone on Skillshare, and whatever course you choose, you will gain new interests and skills, or improve the existing ones you have. Join today. The first 1,000 people to use the link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Visit the link in the end screen today and explore your creativity and learn new skills. The World War II, captured on movie newsreels and bulletins, was a silent war. In most cases, cameramen had no means to record sound easily in the field, the equipment being too bulky and heavy. In most cases, the sounds of fighting and vehicles that you hear on World War II period footage was edited in later before being shown to audiences. It was, to borrow an American expression, phony. The leaders, too, are largely silent to us. Most of you watching this are familiar with the voices of the World War II Allied leaders, President Roosevelt, Prime Minister Churchill, and of course President Truman, these being recorded during special speeches using the same equipment used in Hollywood movies and radio stations of the period. But do you know what the Allied generals sounded like? The men with often very big personalities and egos that actually fought and in many cases won the war in Europe and the Pacific? I'm guessing you don't. So here is a selection of speeches by the generals who are household names today, but for most people, for most of their lives, just silent faces in old black and white newsreels. I haven't been able to find examples of every important Allied general, admiral and air marshal, but here, in order of broadcast dates, are some of the greats. We begin with a man whose wartime reputation has already divided the comment sections of previous videos where he has appeared. Bernard Montgomery was an unknown British general propelled to celebrity status by his being given command of the 8th Army during the vital North African campaign against Erwin Rommel. His victory at El Alamein in 1942 and his rather peculiar dress sense, in particular his black beret with 2 cap badges, a general's and one for the Royal Tank Regiment, secured his popularity in Britain, and Monty, as he was affectionately known throughout the Empire, would go on to head British Empire forces in the invasion of Sicily and command all Allied troops during D-Day in 1944. Monty was a small man with a big ego, and rather tarnished his reputation with his Operation Market Garden parachute assault to capture bridges across the Rhine in the Netherlands when it failed spectacularly in September 1944. And he further divided American opinion by his vital contribution to stopping the German Ardennes offensive in 1944-45, his rather divisive manner causing problems with the American High Command. Monty led the British 21st Army Group to victory, leading British and Canadian forces from Normandy through Belgium and Holland and into Germany, ending the war at Hamburg in May 1945, Monty being knighted and achieving the rank of Field Marshal by war's end. Monty died in 1976 at the age of 88. In the following clip, he addresses the 8th Army in the desert in 1942, when he was about 55 years old.
We will stand and fight here. If we can't stay here alive, then let us stay here dead. I want to impress on everyone that the bad times are over. They are finished. Our mandate from the Prime Minister is to destroy the Axis forces in North Africa. I have seen it, written on half a sheet of notepaper. It can be done, and it will be done, beyond any possibility of doubt. What I have done is to get over to you the atmosphere in which we will now work and fight. You must see to it that this new atmosphere permeates right down through the 8th Army, right down to the most junior private soldier. great point to remember is that we are going to finish with this chap Rommel once and for all. Now, my forecast of this battle is that there will be 3 definite stages. First, the break-in to the enemy's positions, then the dogfight, and then the break-out. We will do the break-in on the night of the 23rd of October. The dogfight battle will then begin, and it will involve hard and continuous fighting. I believe that the dogfight battle will become a hard killing match and will last for 10 or 12 days. The enemy will crack. Then will come the breakout, and that will lead to the end of Rommel in Africa.
Our second character is the equally divisive Douglas MacArthur. MacArthur commanded US and Filipino forces during the Japanese invasion of 1942, which culminated in the terrible Battle of the Bataan Peninsula and Corregidor Island, and US defeat. MacArthur, however, saw none of this, being ordered to Australia by the President, who deemed him too valuable to become a prisoner of war. This move was not popular, and divided opinion about MacArthur till the present day. He famously vowed to the Filipino people, "I shall return." It was a promise that MacArthur was determined to keep, and he would, liberating the archipelago against fierce Japanese resistance in 1944-45, following a successful but bloody advance up through New Guinea. MacArthur ended the war as a 5-star general of the army and took the Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay, and was the supreme commander in occupied Japan. MacArthur died in 1964 at the age of 84. Here he speaks in 1944 about the coming campaign to liberate the Philippines.
2 years ago, when I landed on your soil, I said to the people of the Philippines whence I came, I shall return. Tonight, I repeat those words. I shall return. Nothing is more certain than the ultimate reconquest and liberation from the enemy of those and adjacent lands. One of the great offensives of the war will, at the appropriate time, be launched for that purpose. With God's help, it should be decisive, not only of redemption, but of Japanese isolation from southern conquest and of Chinese restoration of Pacific Ocean communication.
One of the most contentious reputations earned during World War II was that of Arthur Harris, the air marshal responsible for galvanizing Britain's aerial campaign against Germany through a new tactic agreed to by Churchill known as area bombing. Previously, the Royal Air Force had tried to make precision nighttime attacks on German industrial and military targets. It hadn't worked very well. With cabinet approval, Harris directed mass bomber raids using high explosives and incendiaries against big targets, such as entire cities, the aim being to obliterate German factories and military centers and also lower civilian morale, leading to Germany's defeat. The damage inflicted was stupendous, and some of the really huge raids have become infamous, in particular Hamburg in 1943 and Dresden in 1945. Very controversial among the upper command echelons at the time, Bomber Harris's tactics also cost the lives of over 50,000 British and Commonwealth aircrew, and the overall effects on German war production and civilian morale are also still debated today. Harris, as will be seen in the following clip, was a tough, no-nonsense commander who ended the war an Air Chief Marshal with a knighthood. He died in 1984 at the age of 91. In this clip, he is about 51 years old.
The Nazis entered this war under the rather childish delusion that they were going to bomb everybody else and nobody was going to bomb them. at Rotterdam, London, Warsaw, and 100 other places, they put that rather naive theory into operation. They sowed the wind, and now they are going to reap the whirlwind.
The liberation of Paris in August 1944 was a very important event in the Western European campaign. The breakout of US, British and Canadian forces from the battle in Normandy following D-Day, culminating in a headlong German retreat back to the very borders of the Reich. Often overlooked are the Free French forces that landed in southern France in Operation Dragoon and advanced alongside American forces, helping to liberate their own country and capital city and erase the shame of the 1940 surrender. Their political leader, General Charles de Gaulle, was a very divisive figure in the Allied camp, a tall, arrogant man who had a difficult and often fractious relationship with the other Allied leaders, but a French national hero and a figure around which many French people rallied during the war. De Gaulle would go on to become President of France and died in 1970 at the age of 79. In this clip, he was 53 years old. Here he addresses the citizens of liberated Paris in the famous Martyred Paris but Liberated Paris speech. My apologies for the lack of English subtitles on this one.
Paris, Paris outragé, Paris brisé, Paris martyrisé, mais Paris libéré, libéré par lui-même, libéré par son peuple avec le concours des armées de la France, avec l'appui et le concours de la France tout entière, c'est-à-dire de la France qui se bat, c'est-à-dire de la seule France, de la vraie France, de la France éternelle.
The other major figure in the long Pacific campaign was U.S. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz. As General MacArthur advanced up through New Guinea and the Philippines, Nimitz and his U.S. Marine Corps and Army amphibious forces island-hopped towards Japan via several famous naval battles and landings on heavily defended islands, some of which are remembered today, places like Peleliu, Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Nimitz, not a flamboyant character like MacArthur, ended the war a fleet admiral. He died in 1966 at the age of 80. In this clip, he was about 60 years old.
My fellow Americans, I ask your help. On behalf of all your fighting sons, brothers, and husbands whom I command in the Pacific, I ask for two things which are urgent musts. First, I ask that every skilled man and woman in America who can work in a shipyard volunteer immediately for the urgently essential work of getting our damaged ships back to us and getting new ships out to us. Second, I ask that you invest every cent you can now in war bonds. My voice comes to you across 6,000 miles of ocean before it reaches American soil. Those 6,000 miles are spanned by a bridge which you at home have built to our forces in the Pacific. It is the longest bridge ever built. It is a bridge built of money, men, food, munitions, and American ingenuity. But each link in its span is a ship. The support and success of our whole Pacific war depends on ships.
Another figure who is not widely remembered today was British General William Slim, a forgotten general from a forgotten campaign by a forgotten army, the 14th, who managed to turn around the British Empire's efforts against the Japanese in Southeast Asia and lead the 14th Army in very difficult circumstances through Burma in 1944-45. Often overshadowed by his boss, the younger and better connected Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, the King's cousin, Slim was the man who beat the Japanese, and he was held in great affection by the British, Indian and Gurkha soldiers who served under him in the appallingly difficult fighting in Burma and India, where places like Imphal, Kohima and Mandalay have entered the national consciousness. Uncle Bill Slim, as he was known, died in 1970, aged 79.
But what you've got to do
is to choose your subordinates and then decentralize to them. Don't try and do every goddamn thing yourself, because you'll kill yourself, unless you make somebody so angry that he shoots you. And one of the mottos for a commander who is going to survive the strain of command for any length of time, I would say, is don't keep dogs and bark yourself.
There can be few more famous or contentious figures than General George S. Patton, Jr. He came to prominence in the North African campaign as an aggressive and effective commander of armoured forces, and would go on to greatness in Sicily and northwest Europe, saving the day during the German Ardennes offensive and being greatly feared by the German command. But he was also rabidly anti-communist, leading to disagreements concerning the US relationship with its ally, the Soviet Union, very severe in handling his men, particularly those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, leading to several scandals, and latterly controversial in his attitude to Nazism and the occupation of Germany. He died under equally controversial circumstances following a car accident in Germany in 1945, aged only 60. Our image of old blood and guts Patton is today that of George C. Scott, the Hollywood actor who played him famously on film. But the real Patton was quite different. He didn't have Scott's gravelly voice. In fact, he had a high, nasally voice and more than a passing resemblance to a younger and thinner Donald Trump.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming over here, there was a very great lesson. The first 4 hours, we passed over a destroyed land, utterly destroyed. You who have not seen it do not know what hell looks like from the top. That's what Germany looks like. That's what Austria looks like. That's what any place that the 8th Air Force and the 3rd Army worked on looks like. You must remember this, that from Brest to various towns in southern Germany and Austria, whose names I can't pronounce, but whose places I have removed, the trail of the 3rd Army and the 19th Tactical Air Command and the 8th Air Force is marked by more than 40,000 white crosses.
And finally, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Allied Supreme Commander in Europe, who galvanized and led the often competing British and American forces to ultimate victory over Germany. Not a fighting general like Patton or Monty, Eisenhower was a different kind of leader who had to manage all the big personalities and keep everyone singing off the same hymn sheet. An often thankless task, Eisenhower nonetheless kept the Western Allied alliance together, and although many of his decisions remain controversial, he deserves the credit and honors that were his at war's end. He would go on to be a very successful President of the United States and died in 1969 at the age of 78. A chain smoker, his deep voice and quiet but strong demeanor are captured here in this clip from 1945. He was 54 years old at the time.
I have the proud privilege of speaking for a victorious army of almost 5 million fighting men. They and the women who have so ably assisted them constitute the Allied expeditionary forces that have liberated Western Europe. They have captured or destroyed enemy armies totaling more than their own strength. Merely to name my principal subordinates in the Canadian, French, American, and British forces is to present a picture of the utmost in efficiency, skill, loyalty, and devotion to duty. The United Nations will gratefully remember Tedder, Montgomery, Spatz, Bradley, Villatte, Creer, and many others. But all these agree with me in the selection of the truly heroic figure of this war. He is G.I. Joe, and his counterpart in the air, the Navy, and the merchant marine of every one of the United Nations. He has braved the dangers of U-boat infested seas. He has surmounted charges into desperately defended beaches. He has fought his tedious, patient way through the ultimate in fortified zones. He has endured cold, hunger, fatigue. His companion has been danger. Death has dogged his footsteps. He and his platoon commanders have given us an example of loyalty, devotion to duty, and indomitable courage that will live in our hearts as long as we admire those qualities in men.
Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels, PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.